Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Tuesday, January 18th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. I was just kind of in the intro music. If you're watching us on YouTube, I was kind of air guitaring and I was thinking about the music, even though I arranged the music, the loops to make the intro song. I'm not actually sure which instrument I should be air playing during the intro. I
It's a
went with a
guitar.
guitar. Yeah, no, I went with the guitar, but I mean,
Yeah.
there's other options in there. There's some little bits of funk in there if you listen real carefully. So you've got your choices. Like you can hammer away on some kind of electric keyboard if you want to airplay a keyboard. Really, let us know which instrument you like to airplay when you hear the intro to our podcast.
I also feel like it speeds up, like it starts fast and then it catches itself.
That is a video only specialty. So if you watch us on YouTube, you understand
Ah.
that phenomenon completely. Yeah, it like plays in double time for a split second or even a full second or two, and then it goes to its regular speed. I don't know why it does that. If you listen only as a podcast, you were like, what the hell are these guys talking about? Why are they drinking on a Tuesday? It's early. What's going on?
Well,
On
apparently has something in common with my heart, because I fainted this weekend. Ended up in the emergency room. Was not exciting. I've had some near faints in the past. I've fainted maybe twice in my life, and I run a really low blood pressure regularly. I'm kind of like a 90 or 60 guy, and I guess I just crashed. I got up and I passed out, and then there was a doctor, at the restaurant we were at, and then I was at the friggin' hospital, and then they were like, "Well, it was kind of like when you bring the car in and it's not making the noise anymore." Like we got to the hospital, and they're like, "Well, your blood pressure's fine now." I'm like, "Yeah, I feel totally cool now after I've
oh,
ruined my friend's evening." My friend was like, "Oh my god, I'm sorry, I called the ambulance," and I'm like, "No, you did the right thing." But
sometimes you just have to make that call and you hope it was just precautionary, and in this case it sounds like it was. Glad you're feeling a lot better. And yeah,
just
that
something to have to be aware of. I guess as you get older, like things, I've had those near fainting turn into full fainting. So I gotta, yeah, probably means more tests and heart stuff, and we'll see. But I'll take it, I guess, over the other side. The other side is rougher. High blood pressure, you got to change your diet, and it's a little bit more intense.
I'm avoiding going to the doctor for that reason. I expect next time I go to the doctor it's gonna be, hey, you really need to start laying off on cheese, meat,
Uh-huh.
all these things you enjoy, because I've always run with the high blood pressure. I have been
Mm.
a high stress human probably from the time I was about 7 years old. I don't know why.
That's why we're such a good match. Together, we have one normal heart.
Yeah, like, yes, combined, I think we have a heart that could last a very long time. Apart, we're gonna need a little help along the way, but as long as we do what we're supposed to do, we'll be okay. But yeah, lots to talk about on this episode, even though nothing's happening really in baseball. And we had a rundown, of course, for last Thursday due to some unforeseen circumstances. No show that day. I'm going to guess that we're going to have extra shows randomly sprinkled in as we get closer to the actual start of the season, whenever that is.
Especially like emergency ones if some sort of agreement is reached. And
Yeah, so I always feel bad when we're down a show or we say we're going to be somewhere and we're not. Look, we'll make up for it. We'll have some fun again at some
also,
point in the future.
and I wonder, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. It's a failing of mine. My commute is 1 minute. I go downstairs. And I haven't found it super, like, podcasts, like they're talking and they're saying interesting things. Like I have the TV on, but most of the time it's not interesting.
It's really not.
It's just blah. It's just like a thing. Like there's somebody here. I'm pretending there's somebody here in my office with me. But podcasts, like I would be listening to it and then I wouldn't be doing my work. So I wonder if other fantasy podcasts are just jumping into off-season content in the normal pattern, because we honestly here, wouldn't we be doing some like positional previews about now? Like, wouldn't we be kind of going team by team at least or something like that?
Yeah, we have.
Which is why we may have to have some extra podcasts. We'll be like, oh crap, season in 3 weeks. Let's go.
Dealer's choice, really, as far as how we break it up. Yeah, I think it's usually around the last week of January when we start our positional previews. So I will spend some time this week kind of mapping that out with you, and then we'll go from there. I think that's where everybody's at. It's kind of like, hey, let's do the fly arounds, and if we find
But I
out we
think
got more
also
time
everyone's a
later, we
little
use it.
behind, right? Like there's
I don't know. I didn't release any rankings yet, even though I was planning on doing it months ago. I decided not to do it for a while, and
there's more players that could be traded or could be signed than usual right now.
there are, but you could still put stuff out and just update it. So I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I get the sense everybody wants to just pretend it's all fine, which I think is a perfectly normal way to go about it. If baseball is your work, if it
I don't
is
know. I'm starting to have a little bit of optimism about the
like the real
labor talks.
optimism, not the like,
Well, just
yeah,
because
it's gonna be
they
fun.
finally got to the table, right? And they seem to be speaking the same language. You know, there doesn't seem to be any line in the dirt, any line in the sand that's like, you know, we need everyone to be a free agent after 5 years or we're going on strike. Like I haven't seen that sort of language in there. In fact, I think it's been okay. Like they are talking past each other, but as you can tell, like the things that they're saying in each of their they're not full proposals. They're just discussing. No one's made like a full proposal since the union did. But the things that they are sort of proposing to debate on are becoming more similar, I think. So I think the big battle will be the minimum. So we'll see. You know, and I think that the owners went to 600,000, which would actually be one of the smallest increases in a CBA since free agency began, going to
Yeah,
600,000.
that doesn't seem like that's the end point. Even
Yeah,
if they don't get to a full million, or whatever the target ends up being,
758. You know,
with room to maybe escalate it more quickly throughout the course of the CBA too. I could see that maybe being part of
that's my sort of
the
offhand
solution.
prediction right now is like 750 or 8. I'm gonna go with 8 because I think that's a bigger deal, and that's where they should put all their energy. 800,000 minimum, no more qualifying offer. You know, and the CBT goes up to like 225. And baseball's already said CBT to like 218. Well, that's BS. The CBT should go up $4 million after revenue, after overall revenue in the sport has like nearly doubled. Like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, still some work to be done, but maybe you're right. Maybe some reasons to be optimistic, as we have been doing for the last few episodes. Keeping a close eye on that mailbag, getting a sense for what people are interested in before we get to our usual, draft prep sorts of questions. And I thought this email from Eric was really interesting. He's been running a long-standing league, and after the 2021 season, a few teams elected not to return for 2022. Their claim was that the injuries became too random and too frequent, and they made the overall competition too reliant on luck. They basically were saying fantasy baseball is no longer fun because of the injuries, which 2021 was a bad injury year, especially early on. Lots of key players. He mentions in the email, right? You have Trout, Tatis, Acuna, DeGrom, Bieber, Rendon, Adalberto Mondesi, Eloy, Jack Flaherty. Those are a lot of very early picks that missed considerable amounts of time. So the question is, aside from IL manipulation, is there any data that suggests the injuries have become less predictable and more frequent? And if so, how can the fantasy community manage this?
Well, I mean, obviously, COVID is a factor here, and as a person who plays fantasy basketball right now, I'll tell you that it has become frustrating in that sport. And in fact, way more frustrating than I think it ever was in baseball. In baseball, it seemed to be sort of one or two teams at a time, and over fairly quickly. Basketball, it seems like every team has somebody that's out right now. In our basketball league, we created a thing called IL Plus, or at least Yahoo did to deal with this. IL Plus is an IL spot that has fewer rules associated with it. As long as someone is out for the game, you can stash someone there. So I've seen that, right, in our fantasy leagues. There's been, if you had a limited IL fantasy league, they probably added IL spots in the last couple of years. They should have.
Yeah, and that's been something that historically I didn't like to have in leagues. I always felt like you should have to make some difficult decisions with your bench spots, but because of COVID, especially in the way the COVID IL has worked, the added number of absences, the shorter term IL with the 10-day IL that switched a couple years ago too, I've softened on that quite a bit. It's funny that the things that you think you're just locked in on at one point in time, you get a few years down the road, you're like, actually, I shouldn't have dug in quite so much on that. That probably wasn't.
I
That
said
probably
I
wasn't
would
worth
never
it.
live in Palo Alto. Never. I graduated school in here. I said I'm never coming back.
Oh man! And now,
Now I can see school. I'm looking at school right now.
you could see throw a rock out your window and hit school on a
But
good day.
so there's something else going on though, because we've done some reporting. I've done some writing about arm injuries going up after the shortened 2020. I think that was a thing where the whole process of being a starting pitcher is to create the ability to pitch that long for over the course of the season, pitch that long into a game, and then pitch that long over the course of the season. You treat the whole year as a process of getting ready to, for 6 to 7 months, do this. So with 2020 in there, obviously starting pitching took a step back. I would say hopefully that next season would be better in that way for starting pitching, because now that it's a much more normal off season, they've had a normal season and now a normal off season. Hopefully we start on time or near on time so that they're prepared for the type of season they're going to get. So already we're saying maybe because we don't know when the season will start, and that does also highlight the fact that players are locked out of team facilities right now.
Yeah.
So I would say that someone who is rehabbing right now is a little bit like someone rehabbing during COVID, where they're not rehabbing under optimal conditions. However, the MLB Players Association made a deal with, I forget the name, some sort of facility, and apparently there's a ton of them. IBAT, something like that. Anyway, there's some sort of facility. Britt was tweeting about it that now any player can go into free of charge as a member of the union. And they've got basically a year on that. However, that's not the exact same as like being able to be in touch with your doctors, your trainers, everybody at the organization. So you have to really lean on your agents, your local facilities, and so we may see some injury from there. But not to be long-winded, but the last thing that is actually maybe the source, and I was listening to your names. I'm not sure that there's a couple of them that were this. The biggest increase year over year in injuries last year was hamstring pulls. There were more strained hamstrings, almost twice as many last year as in the past. And so Rob Maines and Derek Rhodes did a great piece on that in Baseball Prospectus. And again, I think it's very tempting to be like, well, they had like that weird 2020 season. So 2021, they just weren't ready for the full season. Hamstring strains, it's not going to happen in the future. However, nestled within that piece was some analysis that this is a long-term issue. And so the question I put to you is, do you think that there's a possibility that players are training, and not incorrectly, but they're training with different goals in mind, for example, bat speed and exit velocity, and less with sort of general athleticism and base running speed in mind? And if this could be a consequence of that.
Was the increase in hamstring injuries, was it year over year for a few years, or did it just spike up to this new level?
More of a spike, but there was some research that was saying that it was trending up across the sport in terms of like in college and among kids.
Okay, so I guess I think about it a few different ways. Like I think of a hamstring injury is the kind of injury that you suffer either because you weren't like stretched out, loosened up enough, and you sprinted, which it's a stop-start game. We talk about that all the time. Even defensively, you're coming from a dead stop to a rapid start. When you're running the bases, you're gaining speed really quickly, and you get hurt decelerating a lot. So part of it is just the nature of the game. And then the question is, if you're not training properly, how is the way you're training making it worse? Is it strength imbalances? Are you too strong in some areas and not strong enough in others? Which I think kind of drives at the suggestion you had that people are optimizing for barrels, they're optimizing for power
Things they get paid for.
Rather than speed, because speed is less important now than it was in the past. Clearly, just based on the way teams try to steal bases. Although you still want fast players, you still get a guy first to third, first to home. Those things happen if you're
teams
fast.
kind of be like, we need one fast player,
right?
So, like Terrence Gore has like 6 rings.
Yeah. So you have changed what teams are trying to do and what players are trying to do as a result. I could look at that and say, yeah, okay, I kind of believe that. The increase that we saw, even if it doesn't stay at the 2021 level, because that was unique to players having that weird run up to 2021, we're going to have more hamstring injuries, more soft tissue injuries in general. Hamstrings, quads, calves, all that stuff could stay up, relatively speaking. And that wouldn't surprise me all that much. But I also wonder how much you look back at what happened this year if you're a player and say, hey, I don't want to miss 40 games. I don't want to miss 6 weeks with a bad hamstring injury, and I'm going to do something different. So I wonder if there's a counteraction that we see. Maybe it doesn't come in 2022 for the lockout reasons. I mean, again, the training at a different facility is not the same as rehabbing an injury. I get there's so many ways to take this, but I think where I'm at right now is I have less injury optimism than I normally do with players coming off of major injuries for the reasons that you described. I feel like the soft tissue stuff can fluctuate a lot, and I want to see more. So I'm not ready to draw a strong conclusion there, but I'm worried about Acuna. I'm worried about Mike Soroka. I'm worried about anybody coming off of a major injury that requires a lot of extra attention from team doctors and athletic trainers. And I realize that there are probably some other workarounds in play that we don't know about. Every situation's different. I think that's one area where I'm going to be a little more careful in 2022. The question, though, yes, there are more IL stints now than ever, right? Like that is borne out in the numbers. So this is a bigger problem. If you haven't changed your structure for your league to have either more bench spots, more IL spots, or some combination of both, you need to do that. So it used to be 19 hitters, 9 pitchers, 7 bench spots, and maybe 2 or 3 IL spots in leagues that had them, and that was enough. I think you want to expand benches by at least 1 spot and expand IL spots by at least 2. And I think that would be closer to ideal. You're the commission in most cases, like, are you or someone you know is the commission. I realize for bigger contests, you don't have that say, so you have to just accept it for what it is. And those leagues have already started up, so we're not getting changes in overall contests for this year because it's too late to change it now. But I do think we need to be aware of this. I think the other tactical change you have to think about, if there's a way to work around it, and I realize only certain sites can handle this, I think increasing the number of lineup changes you're allowed to make is huge. I know some people out there still play in daily moves leagues. I don't love that format, but it's another place where I've moved a little bit, because for all this frustration, for all these absences that pop up midweek for any number of reasons, it is a lot less frustrating to be able to go ahead and make a correction on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday than it is to have to wait until at least Friday and the twice weekly changes. If you're in a once a week
at least
lineup change, you got to fix that.
But we've seen, like, isn't the NFBC Friday thing almost like a new thing for them? They used to be fully weekly, right?
They've been Fridays for a while for hitters, only for hitters though. And I just think that.
But there's nothing more frustrating than the hitter goes down with an injury or like you have a Tuesday game, like your team starts on Tuesday that week and you don't find out till Tuesday that the guy's hurt because they don't give you any injury update on Monday because they have a day off.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to err more on the side of what you know on Monday. Like if you have a healthy option on Monday who plays the same number of games, even if it's a lesser player than the guy, you got a Monday to Wednesday guy and a Tuesday to Thursday guy, and the Monday guy's healthy and the Tuesday guy's not, you probably have to err on the side of just playing the Monday guy, not even knowing the identities of the players, just because of uncertainty.
So generally, like, I think to answer this guy's question, this email's question, I would say that yes, there are more injuries, and that by itself means more chaos, and that means more, unpredictability. However, I would say that's always been a part of the game. It's always been a source of chaos and unpredictability. I think it's a major point of why we can't project players better. Either nagging injuries that affect their performance on the field, or just keep them from playing at all, or affect them long term and how good they can be because they've been injured somehow. So I would say it's part of the game. If you can convince them to come back with some of those mitigation strategies in terms of we'll change this, we'll have more IL spots, we'll have more bench spots, then that's worth doing. But if they think that it's completely up to luck now just because there are slightly more injuries, I would say that they're probably overreacting to a few injuries they had in their squad last year, and they got mad that they should have won, quote unquote. And you're not going to do much to convince somebody of that. I think, the two people that will leave your league that you were not going to convince to come back are the ones that felt they should have won, and something about the rules or the game kept them from winning, or the one that thinks they can't ever win because in that dynasty league somebody has amassed too much talent at the top. Those two are very hard to convince to come back.
Yeah, dynasty leagues hit a point. I think it's always like 4 or 5 years in where you have the teams that can win and the teams that can't. And if those groups if it's like 4 teams can win and most of the other teams can't, that league's toast. Like that league's not coming back from that at a certain point. So it takes a lot of balance to pull that off. But I think
And rules, I think that it's tricky. I think dynasty, the rules are important. The rules of the game are super important to keep everybody invested and interested, and to make sure there's movement and player movement and stuff like that.
So midweek replacements, whether that's even just a twice weekly switch or even going to daily moves, that helps you avoid some of that lost time. You have to find what's right for the league, put it to vote, but at least offer those as alternatives to the weekly lineups that are out there. I would say redemption for players that do get hurt. We have that in tout wards and labor. You lose a player. I know not every league uses fab, but you could also have redemption in the form of moving up in waiver priority or something along those lines. So you lose a key player.
You lose a top 3 round pick, you immediately go to the top of the waiver. If you use them for the year, you go to the top of the waiver.
Right. You go to the waiver, top of the waiver order.
So if you don't have fab. Yeah.
So you can work on some wrinkles like that. The other thing is more extreme, also requires a little more legwork by the commissioner. But hey, we're about solutions here. So if devastating injuries are a big part of why people are leaving your league, I think you could actually have some kind of built-in protection where you say, we're going to split the season into 2 or maybe even 3 parts. And that's something Jake Seeley's done for a long time. And after every either 50 game stretch or after each half, we're going to redraft. Maybe you could protect a handful of players. You can set it up however you want.
Or even have rewards for each.
Separate first half, second half.
Like a first half cup where you get 10%, you get like double your fee back or something, Then if you got your injury at a different time, like you just didn't win, but you got your money back because you had a good team in the first half.
So think about some things like that your league might be into, because I think the way the founding fathers of fantasy baseball put the game together, it's great, but we don't have to stick to that. We're 40 years past that now. So let's adapt a little bit and make a game that everybody still wants to play. Like I might like old Roto, but not everyone's going to play that way. So it's okay to
I like this idea of redrafting. It's funny though, because there are definitely 2 skills in fantasy baseball that are separate. There's drafting a good team, and then there's roster management, and I think looking at me, I think the thing that I have to learn every time I learn a new game or learn a new platform is roster management. I think I've always been a good drafter, and it's been, that's what's separated me from, taking that next step. So, by doing that, the one thing you are losing is that roster management skill, and you're rewarding better drafters. If you drafted if you thought about it, if you drafted 10 times a year, you'd be rewarding only drafting.
Yeah, but what's funny is I've played in some of the in-season NFBC leagues over the years. I think I've done one at Memorial
Oh, they
Day
always do like the half. Yeah, they have
and
one. They have a bunch
one
at
in the
half.
4th of July, I think was the other one I've done. And it is definitely different flying without the groupthink, without months of prep, without the full season
Mm.
projections in front of you. It leads you
People
down.
overvaluing hot starts
Yes, like
for the
the
most part.
players that have over and underperformed up to that point are fascinating because the recency bias is even thicker than it is when you draft at the end of a full season. Like even if
Yeah,
you do a
because we've
full season draft in
forgotten
October,
who was great in September, you know?
right? Like even when you do that exercise just at the end of a full season, there's a lot of recency bias. There's even more when you do in-season redraft. So it's just another way. Like if you're trying to find something different that'll get people interested, have another draft, reset it,
Mhm.
keep 1, keep 3, keep 0, keep 5. I don't care how you set it up, but there's a solution in there somewhere. So thanks a lot for the email, Eric. Definitely a frustrating thing that we've all been dealing with here in the last couple of years with injuries piling up. We got an email from Adam. Adam was wondering the best way to use BABIP to determine if a player actually had a bad season or was unlucky. Are there other stats to look at to help determine this? I would have thought K percentage, but I looked at Kevin Newman, who had a sub 20% K rate and a bad BABIP, and I wasn't sure how much improvement I could expect to see out of a player of his caliber. Thanks for any help. Love the show, Adam. All right, so BABIP, I think a few years ago, like 10 years ago or even 15 years ago now, the first time BABIP started showing up places, it was really exciting because it was like, hey, we get to have this secret sauce that's going to help us find players who were lucky and unlucky. And then I think we realized once we had more information about the quality of contact that hitters make
Mhm.
and quality of contact that pitchers allow and all the other factors that can lead to a higher low BABIP, that number in isolation wasn't quite as useful as we would have hoped. But I do think we can start to use it as, or you can continue to use it as more of a flag of something that's just off compared to a player's career norms. I think when I look at BABIP, if I have it on the dashboard for any reason, I'm just looking to see if it's way up or way down compared to previous years and career levels. And then the question that immediately pops into my mind is, well, why? What's going on here? Why did this BABIP go up or down? What causes could there be? Fortunately, we have things like StatCast. And I think with StatCast, you can look at expected batting average. And I think Kevin Newman, that's probably something that's a little bit more instructive. Like, okay, like what was he supposed to do? The way he hits the ball, the angles and then the velocities at which he hits the ball, what was his batting average supposed to look like? You still have to look at it, I think, more from a year-to-year sort of workflow and keep digging. But I think it gives you a better indication of how lucky or unlucky a player might have been, at least compared to BABIP as the alternative. So that was the first place my mind went when I saw this question. With Newman, it actually wasn't quite as bad as it appeared. If you look at the XBA, should have been in the 250 range. 255 was his XBA. He hit 226 last year. We're still talking about a guy that's probably not useful outside of NL only leagues. And even there's some job loss potential.
Mhm.
But he's not a barreler. He has to run to make like a typical roto profile work. And I would say he, in some weird ways, Kevin Newman is a reason why I'm afraid of Nikki Lopez. Like that is like the downside profile to me of what could go wrong for Nikki Lopez, who ran a ton, especially in the second half, and probably actually helped some people along to titles in certain instances. I just see a guy that doesn't hit the ball hard, even though he makes a lot of contact. And when you do that, it just doesn't give you a lot of paths to be useful.
Oh, that's a great poll. If you look at Kevin Newman's expected batting average, even given his 300, even in his 300 year, they're basically all around 250, 250 and 260, and very steady. And Nicky Lopez, the same thing. He's hit 240, 201, and 300 in his 3 seasons. His expected BA, though, has been 215, 238, and 239. So basically, he's been a 230, 240 hitter his whole life. If he's a 230, 240 hitter again, then he's probably more like a 320 OBP guy with no power. There's going to be a lot of pressure put on his defense. The one thing I will say for Nicky Lopez is, the structure around him seems to point that he's going to be that player because they've said they don't trust Adalberto Mondesi as an everyday player. You kind of want your shortstop to be an everyday player. And then in Pittsburgh, they are in the middle of a renaissance, perhaps, or at least they are at a different point in their rebuilding process where they just need to try everybody out. And that doesn't include necessarily someone like Kevin Newman. You know what I mean? Like they need to try out to see if they got somebody better than Kevin Newman. And I see on their team Diego Castillo and Rodolfo. Man, they're not even on the Fangraphs ones. That's crazy. Rodolfo Castro, Diego Castillo, and Ho-Jin Park. I get his name wrong. Hoy Park. Those three guys are going to get time this year just because they need to see if they're any better than Kevin Newman.
Yeah, so there's
definite
I think
the Royals probably want to win some game. Yeah, playing time downside, as you said. And then the last thing I would say is, yeah, I generally the components of BABIP are if you want to look at some old school stats like line drive rate is a big deal, speed is a big deal, and line drive rate. Speed and K percentage it does mean something. It just means you get more chances, more ducks on the pond. But the last thing, and then like up down spray angle matters because fly ball hitters. I was just looking at somebody. Rhys Hoskins. Rhys Hoskins has a 50% fly ball rate. I think he led the entire league in fly ball rate last year. That's really good for his power, but he's never going to have better than like a 275 BABIP because he hits so many fly balls and they don't have good BABIPs. But all of that is in XBA. So I agree with you that like XBA is a powerful tool. It has all those things. It has a speed. It accounts for how many balls were put in play, and it accounts for how hard it was hit and what angles it was hit in. The one thing that's not in XBA that could be meaningful is horizontal spray angle. So if you are a lefty that hits for decent power and lifts the ball well, you still might not have your expected batting average may not be right for you because you're going to be hitting into shifts a lot. And if you are a pull hitter, even a pull hitter hits the ball hard, you're going to be hitting into the shift. And so that'll cost you some points of BABIP. So I think I would just basically use XBA compared to last year's BABIP to get a sense of how much possible regression there is there. And the only other thing I would then look at is, I think, pull percentage.
Yeah, I think there's a certain type of player that shows up as a chronic underperformer and a chronic overperformer. If you look at like XBA minus actual batting average, you can look at the difference between those two numbers and see, oh, okay, this guy actually was very lucky. If you take the average and subtract the XBA, if the number is positive, that means that player overperformed and got lucky. Air quotes. Could be more going on, but that's where Nikki Lopez falls. Like if you go to Savant, you can make this leaderboard. It's just the expected statistics leaderboard. Sort by that difference column, and if you drop the minimum balls in play to 50, Nikki Lopez is fourth among all qualified hitters in terms of, we'll call it good luck. The number of his actual batting average and the difference between that and the XBA. It's a pretty big difference. But a bunch of guys on that part of the board are hitters like that. There's a couple other weird things I saw, though, too. There are a ton of Giants on that list. I think before I split it down to the lower balls in play number, if it was just qualified hitters, there were 5 Giants inside the top 50. And it was a bunch of different dudes. It was Crawford, Belt, Posey, Wilmer Flores, and Steven Duggar. Those 5 guys don't all hit the same way. But I just thought it was interesting. The Giants were loaded with a bunch of players there. Randy Arozarena pops on this leaderboard as a guy whose XBA at 220 was a lot lower than his actual batting average at 274. He was probably the best player in terms of like being an early round draft pick who I saw in here and was really surprised to see here. Luis Robert was on here, but he was actually 338 and his XBA was 297. That's not like, okay, like fine. That's no big deal. But like Arozarena, 274 down to 220. That made me think, what's going on with Randy? Like, is there actually some more risk there?
Yeah, but he's right into what I was talking about. He puts the ball all over the field. He's very hard to defend. He has, if you look at his spray chart, he pulls, he pushes for power, he pushes on the ground, he pulls on the ground, he pulls for power. There's no real, and he's a righty.
Right.
So you cannot perform the same extreme shifts on a righty as you can on a lefty because, frankly, you have to have a guy near first base. That's
Stupid
it's a
first base.
geometry problem. So thank you for pointing that out. The other thing I would add to the XBA is handedness and pull percentage. But where, for example, does Randy Arozarena rank in terms of pull percentage in the league? I've got here. So Jose Ramirez was actually pulled more than anybody, and is a lefty. I don't see him on the first page. It's interesting. He still could have that balanced profile, but look at this: Kevin Newman among the 15 players that pulled the ball the least last year.
To me, it's just an absence of power in his case.
Yeah, it's not quite the same thing, is it?
That's not spraying the ball all over the place. It's just not being able to hit it hard.
But Juan Soto there, has an interesting profile where it could be ideal for batting average and BABIP. Because he has power to all fields. He's one of the lowest pull guys, and he does make enough contact. So he's in some ways the ideal hitter for BABIP, other than the fact that he's not super, super fast.
The other player that popped into my head too when we were looking at Randy Arozarena just now is Javier Baez, because I think Baez has an actual batting average last year at 265. The XBA was at 241. He swings and misses a lot, but when he connects, he hits the ball really hard, and he doesn't pull everything. If you look at his spray chart, he hits the ball out to center, he hits the ball out the opposite way. And I think that might be kind of part of the, how does Javi Baez get away with this? Well, that's part of it. Like, he hits the ball to all fields, and if you can hit the ball hard and hit the ball to all fields, you can afford to do something like strike out 30+% of the time.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that Giants thing, though. I would say that yes, probably they are going to regress. Just in terms of pull rate, they were 11th in the big leagues in pull percentage, so it's not like they're like going oppo all the time. I can't really explain that one unless they were a very much aggressive mix and match team. So maybe they always had a platoon advantage, and maybe that somehow factored into their BABIP.
I don't think that's a complete fluke, or I don't think it's completely random. I think there's something there. I want to pull on that thread a little bit. Tyro Estrada, favorite player of this podcast, I think, by the end of last season, also on there if you lower that threshold. So it's something that the Giants seem to be doing consciously or through some adjustments, machinations, through something they were doing. They were finding a way to get a lot more out of those balls at play than they were supposed to.
They were 6th in barrel rate, so they hit the ball hard.
That'll help.
But yeah, I would guess that there's be some regression there.
So I think we answered that question from Adam, but I just immediately thought of XBA when I read that question. So thanks for sending that in. Hopefully that page
in the absence of XBA, you're looking at line drive rates, strikeout rates, stolen base totals, looking at ground ball, fly ball, because you don't want to have the Rhys Hoskins profile, and you're looking at pull percentages.
I do. Oh, the other side of that leaderboard too. Before we move on, I just thought that's interesting because it's loaded up with the mashers who you can play further back defensively. You've talked about, I think, Garrick Sanchez is a good example of this on the pod. I think late career Albert Pujols has been a player like this where, yeah, you hit a missile, but guess what? The defenders can play you back because you're so slow that they're still going to throw you out anyway. And then those missiles that should be hits are not hits. And I think that's a sort of a common sort of profile that you'll see if you look at the opposite end of that list for players who underperform their XBA. Sometimes it's actually deserved because of something like speed and how the defense can actually play that player.
Oh, this thing keeps undoing picture and making it pictures. Like, is Chris Owings, was he a overperformer?
I'll be on that momentarily. Owings is a player I never think about. He doesn't even show up on the list when I search for him.
Yeah, something's weird's going on here.
Did he even get 50 balls in play?
Sorry, what was your question? Don't worry about it. Statcast is not working for me right now.
My question was the other end of the leaderboard, and it's a lot of guys that don't run particularly well, so teams can defend them differently.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The hard contact they're making is not being rewarded the way that it should be because there are defenders playing in spots where they can't normally play.
And I would assume a fair amount of them, Gary Sanchez is not that, but I would assume a fair amount of them are big lefties, first baseman types that pull the ball and hit for power.
Yeah, you'll see some guys like that sprinkled in too.
Yeah, so it's a thing, you know. If a player can play you in the infield 3 or 4 feet back, then they can steal hits from you.
What are you doing with Tommy Pham in drafts? He's cheaper than he's been in years. The general vibe around his numbers seems to be that he was unlucky. Like, he's one of the surprising XBA way over actual average. You know, he's a righty. I don't think of him as a dead pull guy. I'm going to verify that by kind of looking a little closer at that now. But he has some speed. He has power, kind of a 5-ish category guy, or 4, I guess, if you kick out batting average, who's available, outside the top 200? I mean, is this the point where he's just declining and it's actually not going to be as good as it appears to be? Because on the surface, this looks like a pretty obvious bounce back target in the middle rounds.
Yeah, I'm buying. The one thing that makes me nervous is he doesn't have a landing place yet. And that might tell us a lot about what his playing time situation will look like, because there is the possibility he goes on the small side of a platoon, but I don't see it. He's projected to be one of the top 10 bounce backs in baseball this year by Steamer. He made it into my bounce back article because he was one of the top 10 underperformers on barrels. His barrels did more poorly than 90% of the population in baseball last year. His eye is still like a top 10 eye in terms of reach rate. So I still think that, you know, people will see him as someone who can help on the base pass, and take a walk and still be around. There's some disagreement about his defense on the corners, but I think that he can still be, he has the athletic skills to be a good defender. So I see him as a starter. And I liked him at the contract that Fangraphs has him crowdsourced. And so I think he will be in demand as a starter type player when things restart, especially since he's not going to garner a long-term contract. So we're talking about someone who will sign for 1 and 10 or 2 and 20, I believe. And that's something that a lot of teams need and will desire. So I'm buying him. I have had 2 DCs I've done on NFBC, and I have them in both. I think as maybe an OF 4 or 5, and the projections see him as better than that in the auction calculator. And so to buy your OF 3 as an OF 4 or 5, I think is a fantasy value. I think in real life baseball, he has the skills that people want. He barrels the ball, and he has a really good eye at the plate, and he's an athlete. So I know there's peripheral stuff that, you know, I think might have been overrated. He's not always the easiest teammate, but I think that somebody will find the prices right and give him, you know, at least an 80% job out there.
And I think it was on this pod where I suggested Oakland, Tommy Pham, Oakland. It all makes sense. He's the kind of guy that goes there, plays a lot, has a good year, and if they hang around in the playoff race, he stays. If they don't, then he's on a contender come August via trade, because I think there's still be some interest.
It's a great idea because they do have I was looking at their outfield just now for a draft I'm in. And right now the outfield starters are Steven Piscotty, Chad Pinder, and Ramon Laureano. You know, Piscotty has one leg out of the league, maybe. I mean, he's pretty close. He's been hurt. So that's his projections are okay. But if the injuries are going to keep him from hitting his projections, then he's not very athletic. He doesn't have a great eye at the plate. and he doesn't hit for enough power to offset those other things. So, and then Chad Pinder, I think, profiles better as a utility player. So they really, you could almost see them having two opportunities in that outfield. At least 1.5. So I like that. I like that pick for you. The one thing that Pham wasn't doing that he needs to do actually is pull more. Like the one reason he was underperforming on his barrels was his barrels were opposite field barrels, which are inferior to pulled barrels. So once again, pull percentage is a very powerful tool. It's just hard because it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. Like for example, we just talked about how Rhys Hoskins' pull percentage versus might hurt him, and Tommy Pham's pull, needs to pull more. So it's not the easiest tool to use, but it's pretty powerful.
The other name on this list that I will not give up on, but I can't draft him right now outside of like the end game of draft and hold because we don't know about his health, is Nick Senzel. The knee could be a problem. Maybe he misses a portion of 2022. It's a great unknown at this point. I think he had an arthroscopic surgery in May. They back in September sent him for another opinion. So the little bits that we saw of him were actually pretty encouraging in the underlying numbers. I'm not talking about the stolen base success rate. He was 2 for 7 as a base stealer, but the plate skills, some of the quality of contact was actually really encouraging. So it's a huge if Nick Senzel can just get healthy, I still think there might be a very good offensive player there.
Yeah, it's really hard to know when to take that shot. I would say that, and this I thought of this a little bit when you were talking about the injuries earlier and Mike Soroka. There'll a couple moments in your drafts where people are taking prospects and not like the number one prospect in all baseball, Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah, I think he's the one for most people.
But we're talking about, taking prospects like Roansy Contreras with the Pirates, or this is where I was in the draft when I was considering Soroka. Roansy Contreras was going. Grayson Rodriguez, the excellent starting pitching prospect for the Baltimore Orioles. So prospects were going. I said, well, I'd rather have Mike Soroka because we're talking about, players that are not likely to get, these are on-off players. They're either going to be worth a lot because they play a lot and they're good, or they're going to be worth nothing. Very sort of 50-50 coin flip, good luck, but you're buying ceiling. That's when I would take Senzel. I would take Senzel over, who's a good batting prospect that people would actually buy for this year.
Oh, at that stage, like we're talking, it's later than Young. It's later than Torkelson. Maybe is it more like a Riley Green for this year only?
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great one because Riley Green could come up and strike out 40% of the time, struggle a little bit, and have to go back down. And yes, he could put together a really great season, but so could Senzel. So in some ways, I would, and it depends a little bit on your roster build and this and that, and the rules of if it's a keeper league. Like I'm not saying take Senzel over Riley Green in a keeper league, but
no.
But like in a redraft, where you're taking a shot. If you have Riley Green and Senzel both on the board, then maybe you take something, you wait for who comes back to you, and if it's Senzel that comes back to you, then that's fine. You're taking a guy who could be good.
Yeah, I can't emphasize this enough. You don't have to draft Nick Senzel.
Right.
You could certainly go to option C, and that I understand. I'm throwing it out there as hey, if we get good health news, there's still something good there in the skills that I think 100%. You want to pay
310
attention
XBA, really good strikeout rate, hits the ball to all fields, has speed.
Your Soroka call, I mean, I was on him last year thinking we'd get a half season or more of him pitching really well. I think people just forget, first off, how young he is. He debuted as a 20-year-old. He's just 24. He turned 24 back in August. There's almost no way he's ready for opening day. I mean, 2 Achilles injuries like that. It's a short list of players that have done that.
Second half, but
yeah.
If I get 50, 60 innings out of him, how much do you think Grayson Rodriguez is going to put together a 150 inning season this year in the major leagues?
There's definitely a question of what I think they're going to do and what I would do being pretty different. Okay. And I would say, thinking about like the success of maybe Alek Manoah last year, especially. How would you look at Grayson Rodriguez and his dominance at AA and say, yeah, I think he needs a half season at AAA? I I'd be surprised. Like, if you want to give him 4 or 5 starts there, just make sure that he keeps dominating. Fine. Like, I'm not going to argue against that. I mean, he's young.
I think it's just a safe play because what you don't make a full season off of Grayson Rodriguez. You don't make the playoffs off of a full season Grayson Rodriguez, I don't think. But what you do is maybe you start the season with Rutschman up there. Maybe you start the season with somebody else up there. You try to build an okay team. You move the walls so that Means has a good ERA, blah, 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 blah. And you change it up. And if everything's going well, then, hey, okay, it's April 1st and, we won 15 games or we won 12 games. Like, yeah, let's see what happens. Let's bring it up now. But then the season could go south just as quickly. He comes up, he struggles, he goes back down.
I think this is just where I've always probably been a little more aggressive than actual player development people and the way teams want to handle things because of service time and whatever other reasons. But I think you want to finish developing pitchers in the big leagues when you're in a situation as dire as Baltimore's. I think you'd rather solve big league problems if you feel like the pitches are big league quality and the command is ready. Put them in the big leagues. And
that's exactly what a farm director told me. He's like, why am I wasting these guys in the minor leagues? I have major league pitch grades on all their pitches. It's time to go.
And I think with Grayson Rodriguez, that's what we're talking about here. Maybe we just landed on a name where it's like, I actually think giving him big league volume this year could happen. That's a short list of pitching prospects. It always is. I mean,
because you need opportunity plus talent
and guys on good teams. I mean, even if you are an Aaron Ashby believer,
I just took Mitch White. The pitching plus loves Mitch White. I took Mitch White, I took Mitch White on the comeback from Mike Soroka. So I just basically took Mitch White and Mike Soroka neck and neck.
And even as it stands right now, the situation for Max Meyer in Miami is more crowded than it is in Baltimore for Grayson Rodriguez. There's nothing on the big league roster that prevents Grayson Rodriguez from being a big league starter the moment he gets the call to Baltimore, whereas other teams, depending on their situation and depth, whether they're contending for the playoffs, managing innings, whatever it is, they all tend to have more complications than what we have with Rodriguez.
Well, fine, I made a bad pick.
No, look,
that's why I was also just trying to put this in context where I think that the heavily injured players, you have to kind of consider them prospects.
That's
they have that same sort of bust rate.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a 0 or 1 in terms of what you're getting for the most part. Like, not in the big leagues, in the case of Soroka, on the IL, and then back. And I think with Soroka, aside from age, people just forget how good he was. 214 big league innings with a 2.86 ERA, a 1.16 WHIP. Yeah, the strikeout rate's not amazing. The ratios are great. That's a World Series winning team that he's on. But there's run support. There's help in the pen protecting his leads. Like, obviously he knows how to pitch. Like, that's how you get to the big leagues as a 20-year-old in the first place. You have all of those traits.
Good command, 3-pitch arsenal. Yeah.
And those pitches could still get better. Like, that was the thing that made Soroka so appealing before the injuries. I think that's all still in play. So all that's a very long-winded way to say, I'm in on the Soroka. Part of drafting players like that in draft and hold or leagues with IL spots, it's not drafting too many because you can't afford too many zeros. You can take a shot with a player or two like that, but that's about it.
It means not drafting them early. Like, it means keeping your nose clean, long enough that you can take some of those shots.
Yep. I'm with you there. So we got one more question here. Maybe we'll squeeze in 2 because this other one's a really easy toss-up sort of question that we can answer pretty quickly. But one more long sort of form question. This one comes from Andrew. He's wondering if we have any opinions on how to spur owners to trade more frequently in long-standing dynasty leagues. His situation, entering year 13, they have 10 teams. They keep 25 to 30 with 40-man in-season rosters. Most teams are balanced and have already gotten their hands on their type of players and prospects, and they're treating their teams as a guide for who to root for in real-life baseball, and it leaves them without many trade fits. The only incentive is during roster cutdowns when everyone wants to consolidate their keepers. Everyone just seems scared to trade away a pre-breakout player. It ignores the possibility they can just as easily come out of a deal on top. We've briefly discussed expanding with 2 more teams, That's obviously a drastic step. Do you have any outside the box ideas for this, or is this cyclical and something we just have to live with for now? Thanks, Andrew. My first thought here, is that this league doesn't sound like it's fallen into the trap of a deeper dynasty league where only a handful of teams can win. Based on description, it sounds like a group of reasonably equally competitive owners, managers that make this a lot more fun to play. So, like, tip of the cap for doing that 13 years in. And maybe part of the secret is only having the 10 teams, because I think those deeper leagues, I think of like RDI, it was a 20-team league with a lot of really sharp players in it. You start to fall behind talent-wise in a 20-team league, harder to make up ground there. In a 10-team league, it's at least possible to start building something that's competitive, because
also
half
just
as many teams are vying for the same guys.
Easier to keep 10 managers happy than 20, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that it is difficult. I think one of the most difficult things is to keep a league vibrant and to keep a league trading, and the one thing that sticks out for me here is that you have no penalties for keeping. And like in Devil's Rejects, we had no penalties for keeping, and that has led to some roster consolidation. I think we're lucky, in effect, to have some people who have won before wanting to win in different ways themselves. Like, I give Tom Trudeau a lot of crap. He's actually named his league Trade Spam, which is, has something to do with the fact that our inboxes are just filled with offers from him. And I've gotten annoyed at him in the past, but he won the league and had like Trout and Goldschmidt and peak performance Kluber and all these players, and then he traded Kluber, Goldschmidt, and something else for Acuna as a prospect. And it blew my mind, because I was just like, what? Those are all, and it was because he wanted to win another way. He wanted to win, with some prospects he held on to. He identified a new core. And that has helped keep the league pretty vibrant. But I generally am pro having some sort of penalty for keeping. I like in Autonew, for example, that the prices go up. I think that tracks with major league team building, and it doesn't make sense just intuitively when you're playing a game that somebody could, and this has been really tough in our basketball league, could get together like 5 of the top stars in the game on one roster and have no reason to trade any of them and just win for 5 years in a row.
Yeah, I kind of see it more as wanting to have a shelf life on the years, even if you don't put prices on players, right? You're doing snake drafts, so there's no salaries or anything.
Keep a guy for 3 years, keep a guy for 5 years.
Having some kind of expiration date on how long a player can be kept, even if it's a flat keep X number of players, that might actually increase the activity, because then you have some urgency. Like, hey, I'm going to lose this core. I want to make moves and trade some young players. Like, I think that's probably your best path without adding teams to the league to incentivize people. But then the same thing that we always say with keeper and dynasty rules, you can't necessarily just do that right now. You kind of have to do it with some warning. You kind of have to say, hey, we're going to add this
after
rule
this season.
After this season.
You could put the numbers on everybody now.
Make this year 1, and then in year 3, after year 5, then this wave of play. That to me would probably be your best bet. If you don't
one way that I do
salaries.
It in the Pitchfork League is that we tie players to the round they were drafted in, and then we have some sort of inflation of rounds. So I had Mike Trout for a while, and like when I acquired him, he was like a 16th round pick, and then he kept inflating. I think I still have him, but now I have to pay like a 2nd round pick to keep him. And just some sort of whatever it is, if it's a price that goes up or a round penalty that goes up or a number of years you can keep them, that just offers some urgency, like you're saying, some constrictions to make things happen.
Hopefully that helps Andrew, anybody else out there in similar situations trying to get activity, because trades are fun. I find in leagues with salaries and expirations on contracts, there's a lot more movement because it just sort of forces some action along the way. Last question here came from Perry. He writes, knowing nothing else about my team, who has a bigger short and long-term fantasy impact between Matthew Boyd and Yandy Diaz? It's a 30-team head-to-head points league, if you're wondering why this is even a debate. I've been staring at this for a few months now. Maybe we can help Perry no longer stare at the Boyd Yandy Diaz debate. Is there a clear side for you on that one that you'd rather be on?
You know, there's something I actually love about Yandy's game where, you know, he doesn't lift the ball well, but he hits the ball really hard. And he has a really good eye at the plate. Let me see what his reach rate is here, but he's 18% last year. Like he's like a top 20 type guy with in terms of eye at the plate. So he does everything I want except for two things. He's right-handed on a team that platoons up the wazoo. He's not that great a glove. And I see, you know, I think I see Taylor Walls like running away with third base and at very least stealing most of Yandy Diaz's playing time there. So right now he's projected for a decent number in terms of steamer because the depth charts say he'll get 30% of the playing time at third base and 30% of the playing time at first base and some playing time at DH. And that'll give him 560 plate appearances. If I knew he was going to get 560 plate appearances, he would be the guy I would keep. I'm worried that Taylor Walls takes that job outright. I'm worried that at 30, there's not much projection left for Diaz. I'm worried that if he becomes a full-time first baseman, he may just bounce around and be kind of a backup first baseman or NLDH type. So it becomes a little bit harder to see the future beyond this year, in which case Boyd might come back around. For next year, I would take Yandy in a second.
Yeah, I think because of the Boyd injury for 2022, I'd be on Diaz. If you're trying to play the long game, I'd rather just have Boyd. Give me the pitcher, the guy that should still be a starter, can be a bulk guy, has flashed at least being kind of a mid-rotation fantasy guy. I mean, what he was doing before he got hurt was actually some of the best stuff we've seen in his career, just in terms of ratios. Had the ERA under 4, had the WHIP at 127. I think I'd rather bet on him getting healthy and then getting a spot to give us 150 innings going to like next season and beyond.
Yeah, there's a path for getting better. Like Yandy's not going to get better with the glove. He's probably not going to lift the ball anymore.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Yandy's hit the point in his career where he's very likely to be like a 300 plate appearance guy, and he'll quietly just fade away. Even though the plate skills are really good and he hits the ball hard, he just mashes it into the ground, and doesn't seem like that's. If the Rays couldn't fix that by now, they're going to get pretty antsy about it because he's arbitration eligible now. So
yeah, right. There's that.
So someone else has to try and fix him.
And I know the UZR numbers aren't great, but just from watching, I doubt there's a lot of other teams that want to play him at third base.
Yeah, I get that sense as well. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. Before we go,
glad we helped. That's got to be one of the deepest leagues of any listener.
I mean, if it's a really specific question that we get to answer on the pod, it will generally be at the very end. And hopefully just the process of how we think about the problem is helpful to people who don't have that exact problem, because I think Perry might literally be the only person on the planet with that exact problem. So hopefully we helped Perry, but I hope we helped a few other people with the way we thought about solving the issue in that situation. On Twitter, he's at Enosaris. I am at Derek Van Riper. The pod at Rates and Barrels doesn't tweet yet. Could tweet soon. You want to be there when it does, because it could be really exciting.
What will the first tweet be?
Oh, it's going to be our combined Wordle score, of course.
Oh, God.
What else could it be?
It's awful. Oh, God.
It'll be an accompanying video of the three of us. We'll have Britt on, and we'll all solve a Wordle together, and then we'll tweet the results.
Shut up.
If you still want to subscribe to The Athletic, 33% off at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. If you want us to go away, I understand that as well, given that there are enough Wordle tweets out there. I'm guilty of it. I did it the first time because I thought it was a cool game. I want to share the game with people. I don't think anyone cares how I'm doing in Wordle, but if you do, just tweet at me and I'll direct tweet it back to you. I'll just have it ready to go because I like to play. But that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on